The Long Island Sound. Just 18,000 years ago, this beautiful tidal estuary of the Atlantic Ocean was nothing more than a basin covered by a thick sheet of glacial ice. So it remained until 8,000 years ago, when the sea level rose to about 80 feet below today's level, and seawater overflowed into the basin, thus transforming it from a non-tidal freshwater lake to a tidal saline arm of the sea. For most residents of coastal Connecticut and New York, there is no escaping the Long Island Sound. Its countless branches stretch into the backyards of many homes and is never more than a short drive away. Lately, we've been hearing so much about its declining water quality. We wanted to find out for ourselves just how much trouble it was in. Before we could do that, we had to learn everything there was to know about our beloved tidal estuary.
So right now we're heading to Todd's Point, which is our local beach, and while checking out some of the habitats associated with the Long Island Sound ecosystem, we hope to find some of the species that live there and that rely on the health of Long Island Sound.
This is Greenwich Point. Also known as Todd's Point, it was 150 years ago two separate islands connected by a tidal marsh. After the wealthy banker J. Kennedy Todd purchased the land in 1884, he erected tide-controlled gates and a causeway, transforming the area into the peninsula that it is today. Within the 148.5 acres of land are several vastly different ecosystems, all of which rely heavily on the Long Island Sound for their continued health.
Our first stop was the salt marsh habitat. This is an extremely important ecosystem as it functions as a storm barrier, a filter for toxins in the water, as well as a home for many species, including this fiddler crab.
This rocky intertidal zone is directly adjacent to the ocean. The many species that inhabit it have adapted to either retain moisture or hide under rocks in order to survive during low tide. An example being this Asian short crab.
The tidal pools of the cordgrass beds function as a nursery for many species of fish, including Atlantic silversides and mummichogs. In addition, the strong-rooted cordgrass dampens currents, preventing erosion and providing additional protection to fish and invertebrates.
Next, we visited the exposed sandbar and found a vast amount of seaweed anchored to the rocks. The nitrogen-filled sacs in this knotted rack species are called pneumatocysts and enable the seaweed to float on top of the water, maximizing its sun exposure. We just picked up these various saltwater test kits, and our plan for the next couple of weeks is going to be to take these to various locations around Todd's Point, water treatment plants, and we're going to get some samples that we can bring back here and test. So, what are the tests we have?
Well, we got phosphates, dissolved oxygen, which has to be tested on site. We got ammonia, we got pH, we got nitrates, and nitrites, and then we got
A refractometer to measure salinity.
Right now, we are going to be headed to our friend's dock so we can take the boat out and try and catch some fish and also get a sample from the mid-ocean. Buoy 32A, our preferred fishing spot, was only a 5-minute drive from our friend's dock.
The first fish we caught was a black sea bass. It's a type of grouper, ranges from Maine to northeast Florida. Normally inshore or around reefs up to 430 feet, max size around 20 inches. They're called hermaphrodites. They start as females, turn into males. That's a female right there. And they eat clams, crabs, and the like. That's a female, around 15 inches, rather large. The next species we caught was a northern sea robin. It's a subspecies of sea robin here in the Sound. What a nice looking fellow right there. Then we got a black sea bass. It's a male. You can tell by the big fatty bump on his head. He looks like be around 15, 16 inches, so a nice keeper right there. And let's see here, we got a striped sea robin, maximum size around 16 inches. They got 3 legs on each side that are modified pectoral fins they use to find food. Quite an interesting fellow, and they kind of fly around with those large winged pectorals. The next fish we caught was a blackfish. They're notorious bait stealers, and they're vulnerable to overfishing due to their slow reproduction rates. Then we caught An oyster toadfish. This fish is an omnivore. It can be found from Maine to the Caribbean Sea, and the males make a distinctive foghorn sound when attracting females. The last species we caught was a scup. It's an inshore species in the spring and winters along the continental shelves, maximum size around 18 inches. Used to be an overfished species, but populations have recovered.
We tested the water around us for dissolved oxygen on site because of how rapidly it can change. But we also took a sample of water to bring back to John's house that we could run more tests on later. Then we decided to head back to Todd's Point to get samples from all the places we visited earlier. After we got all the samples we needed from Todd's Point, we decided to take a quick 10-minute boat ride over to the Greenwich Grass Island wastewater treatment plant and get a sample from there.
This water treatment plant serves the town of Greenwich, treating its wastewater and dumping the treated water back into Long Island Sound. Recent upgrades to the treatment process have replaced the use of chlorine with an ultraviolet disinfection system, decreasing operational costs and supposedly improving the water quality of the sound.
There you go. After that, we decided to drive home so we could test all the samples we took and analyze the data. Alright, so we finally have our results back from all the water testing we did. Let's take a look at pH first. Okay. This all looks within healthy range.
Yes.
Healthy range, variations probably due to variations in freshwater content. Look at nitrates, essentially zero everywhere.
So, pretty healthy.
Don't have to worry about
Very
those.
healthy, very surprising and healthy. Let's look at salinity. Salinity is going to vary with proximity to fresh water, so we can see by Coscob Harbor,
Was
which
that going to
is
be because
right,
of the dam?
it's going to be the dam, the freshwater
Freshwater dam.
low
Coming down
tide
from
water
Lyoness.
coming out.
Yep.
It's a lot of fresh water, very low salt content.
How's ammonia?
Ammonia. Here we got a little bit of an interesting trend. It's slightly higher than zero, right?
Right.
Below 0.25, higher than zero. But is that necessarily a bad thing? I don't think we could say that.
no,
I
that's-
don't think we could say that. There's always going to be a certain amount
Don't
of
need to
ammonia
worry
in the
about
water.
that. Absolutely
Not too bad, relatively consistent.
Nitrates?
Zero.
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 Cross-
Same
Nitrates
thing
and
with
nitrates.
nitrites as
And
we
that's
did with
great. It's,
nitrates.
not much pollution in the water coming from fertilizer, coming from sewage at this point in the year.
We have the highest phosphate level in Stanford, interestingly enough. But Todd's Point and Coscob, as well as Grass Island, are relatively low. Now, we do see a spike with Grass Island, so there could be something there relating to the waste treatment plant.
The waste treatment plant,
Yeah.
okay. All right. And Stanford Harbor, that
That's-
area,
Not
it's
much
a-
water flow.
there's not much water flow for sure, and there's also a lot of grass. There's a
It
lot
is
of
an
buildings
industrial area as
and,
well.
and grass. People probably using fertilizers. That's running off into the water,
That's true.
contributing to high phosphate levels.
And that seaweed pit at Todd's Point, that's also scarily high phosphate
The seaweed
levels.
pit is let's call it an outlier.
Yeah?
It's not
It's very
hardly-
isolated.
It's an isolated pool, and phosphates were off the charts, as well as relatively high nitrates and nitrites.
High nitrogen and phosphate levels are a normal process of decomposition in the salt marsh. As the plant and the animal matter breaks down, the bacteria releases the nitrogen and the phosphates back in the water, and every outgoing tide then flushes those nutrients back out to the ocean that contributes to phytoplankton growth and development.
Acceptable phosphates levels are around 0 to 0.03. And if you look at the graph, we're above 0.03 in every one of our locations thus far. So phosphates may be, a slight problem. Today we're headed to the western portion of Long Island Sound near New York because we're thinking that the water quality might be a little bit worse as you go towards the city. We got a sample from the SUNY Maritime area, right near the Throgs Neck Bridge, where the population density is much higher, so we expected a higher level of phosphates, nitrates, and all the nutrients we were testing for.
So right now we're heading to Clinton, Connecticut to get a water sample from the eastern portion of Long Island Sound. And we're going to go on a fishing charter, hopefully catch some fish, some summer flounder, possibly some black sea bass, and maybe a few sea robins.
This summer flounder is no fluke. Oh wait, it is! The summer flounder, also known as a fluke, can change its color to match the surrounding bottom. It's also extremely important for the recreational and commercial fishing in the northeast United States. So we just finished sampling from Clinton, Connecticut and from Battery Park, New York, as well as the Throgs Neck Bridge in New York. And what we've seen is nothing crazy, nitrates, ammonia, pH, salinity, all pretty standard across the board. It's possible our test equipment was not sensitive enough to pick up any changes. The only thing we're really looking at that's above normal is going to be your phosphates, and it's above normal everywhere. We've seen a trend; it's higher in harbors, but the east-west trend there hasn't been much.
So at the end of the day, Long Island Sound's not doing too bad. Nitrates, nitrites, and ammonia are all low due to the millions of dollars invested in waste treatment plants like Grass Island.
We have seen that phosphate levels throughout the sound are a little bit too high. This is due to fertilizer runoff and stormwater runoff. It could be a problem going forward, but it's not too much of a problem right now.
Another problem facing the Long Island Sound right now is the PCBs and mercury in the sediment. We can't test for this issue, but it is causing a major debate about dredging in the Hudson area. Dredging can stir up buried toxins, but leaving the toxins in the sediment can result in bioaccumulation in large striped bass and bluefish.
Another trend scientists have noted in the sound is the fact that climate change is changing fish species. Black sea bass and summer flounder are doing very well, while the winter flounder populations are essentially nil.
In the end, we found the Sound to be quite healthy. Although there is room for improvement, the estuary we know and love remains a beautiful and biologically productive ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.